I was attempting to indicate that today we're going to be discussing a very important subject. School has reopened, and your boys and your girls, parents, for those of you who have children or those of you who have relatives who are attending school, we want you to pay very special attention to the discussion for today, because we are talking about issues related to school and what parents, even teachers, children themselves need to know about some of the issues that are encountered. We are going to have a word of prayer, and then we will introduce our special guest. Shall we pray? Father, be with us as we go into today's session. We thank you for your wisdom and your guidance. We pray that as we go into this very important discussion, that you will guide and that you will take full control. In Jesus' name, amen. So, friends, we have with us today two school counselors. As indicated, we are talking about my child is in school. What do I need to know regarding the issues at school? And we have two school, shall I say, experienced school counselors who will be discussing with us common issues that children face today, issues that are impacting our students and what parents can and should do about such issues. I want to begin by introducing my first guest, and she is Miss Renata Joseph. She is the counselor at the Seventh-day Adventist School, Seventh Adventist Secondary School. Miss Joseph holds a master's degree in counseling. She is the Children's Ministries leader at the Clare Hall Seventh-day Adventist Church. And we are so delighted that she has chosen to share with us today on Let's Talk. It's the first time we're having you on Let's Talk, Ms. Joseph. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, Pastor Greene.
Wonderful. And our second guest for today is also a school counselor and shall I say school administrator, somebody who is again very experienced. We have with us Mrs. Marcia Samuel. She is happily married, blessed with two gorgeous girls. She too has an MSc in counseling psychology, a degree from the University of the West Indies. And she has been working with children for over 24 years as a teacher, as a school counselor, and presently she's serving as a school administrator. We are delighted to have you with us, Mrs. Samuel, and welcome to Let's Talk.
Thank you and good afternoon. And just for clarity, it is Mauricia Samuel.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for correcting me. What did I say? I'm not sure, but I will remember.
Marcia.
Oh, okay.
That's
Mauricia.
a name that I get all the time, but it's Mauricia Samuel. Thank you.
Wonderful. So today we're going to be talking with these two school counselors, and they're going to be sharing with us some of the challenges, issues, encounters, of course, with the goal of creating awareness, with the goal of providing our viewers or listeners with a better understanding of some of the issues that are encountered and how we can relate to them. Now, depending on where you are, the new school year has already started. For most of us in the Caribbean context, that in Antigua, for example, we're into 1 week has gone and we're going into the second week come next week. I have deliberately chosen to discuss issues impacting students at this time, as it is the beginning of the new school year for many. I am hoping that parents will listen up and give attention to the issues that we discuss here today. My experience has taught me that there are lots of times that parents are totally unaware of some of the challenges that are encountered And if we give you the information, it is going to make you better able to relate to your child, your children, and perhaps save your child's life, or from death, from trauma, from some long-term psychological, emotional issue. So let's begin by asking, what is the role of a school guidance counselor? Mrs. Samuel, let's begin with you. What's the role of a school guidance counselor?
Well, the overall aim of being a school guidance counselor is to allow our students to thrive in whatever educational institution he or she finds themselves. So that encompasses helping students to do well academically. And under the academic sphere, we look at time management. We look at helping students to choose subjects according to, and careers according to their aptitude, in helping students to work socially well with their peers, and to deal with issues when it comes to interaction with their classmates or persons around their age group, especially in that area of bullying, and also to support students emotionally, where they would have to deal with issues that they experience within themselves and even at home.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Joseph, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Ms. Samuel used the operative word for guidance counselors and school counselors, and that is support. We provide a tremendous amount of support to teachers, to students, and sometimes to parents. Not so much to parents, but we advocate for students with parents. We educate parents, so support for parents as well. So that is the critical role of a guidance counselor. We want our students to do well academically. And so we provide a lot of assistance, academic assistance, whether it's figuring out tutoring options for them, whether it's sometimes assisting them ourselves, whether finding how their ability matches with what they want to do. We provide a lot of support, helping them develop the skills that are going to be necessary for academic excellence. I'm very glad, Pastor Greene, that this morning when you were speaking about the school, one of the things that you said, which it is a firm belief of mine, and I know a firm belief at the school, is that there is a place in education for every child. And so we're just not focused on, at the Seventh-day Adventist Secondary School, we're just not focused on those students who are able to write 9 and 10 subjects. We work with all our students. We know God has placed talent and ability in everyone, and God has a purpose for everyone. And we, as guidance counselors, we try and help each person find their purpose and live up to the full potential that they have. We also provide a lot of support with behavioral issues. A number of times teachers struggle with behavioral issues in the classroom, and counselors also give ideas. Sometimes they sit and work with the students. They give ideas to the teachers. Sometimes they mediate. Well, at least I do mediate between teachers and students. Ms. Samuel also mentioned this. We help them with choosing subjects that match their ability and what they're interested in doing. And we also provide support during crisis times, and we advocate for them when they don't quite know how to express themselves. Sometimes we teach them how to express themselves, and sometimes if they're still not getting across, we advocate for them. So the role of a guidance counselor is one of tremendous support in order to ensure that teachers teach well, which I enjoy working on. Students learn well. They develop well at the secondary school. Spiritually also, we look at their spiritual development, because we are interconnected beings. We are social beings, we are spiritual beings, we are physical beings. So we very much look at their spiritual development as well. How do we get them to have that relationship with God through programs, through outreach, through lots of group discussions. So those are some of the focus and areas of a guidance counselor.
Well, thank you so much. So we have a pretty good understanding of some of the things you do. Now, when I went to school, that's many moons ago. Uh, I, to the best of my knowledge, we did not have guidance counselors in school. Um, this is a new development, but occasionally we had a student or two who would, fight with another or who would steal from somebody else. And I remember in my experience that there was a particular student who was a real troublemaker. He did some terrible things, but that was just one exception. The general challenges we had in schools back then is that either children did not comb their hair properly, or maybe their fingernails were too long, or they were making too much noise in school. That was back then. What are the sorts of issues that arise in today's schools? You know, in terms of, I think it was Miss Joseph who mentioned that sometimes you deal with behavioral challenges. So let's talk about some of the behavioral challenges. What are some of the behavioral challenges that we see in our school systems today?
Okay, I can start.
Okay.
What you mentioned are some of the typical things. We do have to attend to neatness and grooming and ensuring that they know how to present themselves. It's not in the Bible, but cleanliness is next to godliness. And God does want us to present ourselves in the very best way. So working with students on developing that is important as well too. So those are some issues we have. But we also have the fighting. For many reasons, the world has become increasingly more aggressive and violent. So you do have to have help children know how to manage conflict and manage their anger, manage relationships. So you do have fighting. That's an issue that schools struggle with across Antigua, across the world. You do have stealing. That is an issue that we continue to struggle with. Covetousness is an original sin, and so people covet each other's things, and they find means to meet that covetous need. We also have some things entering that might not have been in your time, Pastor Greene, that is a real struggle and a distraction for children as they go through the educational system and go through life as well too. Now we struggle with things like not only bullying, but cyberbullying. That is when you have students going on social media and posting pictures or rude comments or offensive comments, denigrating each other on social media. And that is open to thousands of persons. And sometimes you have persons outside of their school commenting on their pictures or saying mean things about them. So that is really distracting and really hurtful to many students, that issue of cyberbullying. We have addictions because of the time and age that we're in. I know we'll get into this if we're going to be talking about disciplinary issues that affect students. We have addictions to social media, to video games, that are disciplinary issues in school as well too. We have addictions to marijuana. Those are some of the things that really impact students. And then we have things like sexual misconduct, pornography. We have abuse that sometimes can impact a child's behavior in the school. So these are some of the disciplinary issues that schools struggle to help their students deal with.
Thank you so much, Miss Joseph. Mrs. Samuel. I thought I would ask you. I know. Well, maybe I should come back a little later. Do you want to add anything to what Miss Joseph shared?
Well, Miss Joseph said quite a mouthful, but I'll also add there that one of the issues that we especially at the primary school, we face with is the aspect of parents not being present to give structure and to teach students boundaries. So we find that children would tend to go down the line of deviant behaviors, where they get in a lot of fights that are perpetuated with the advent of the cell phone. And so these things are shown on social media. And the fact that in homes, we are not seeing that parents and persons who are close to these children are demonstrating good conflict resolution skills. And so we see that these fights and how they go about fighting, because in your days, it was fighting with fists. Now it's fighting with bottles and different types of weapons, knives, and so on. And nobody wants to sit down and talk to the other person. So that's the only thing that I'll add there, along with the peer pressure aspect.
Let me follow up a question here to you, Mrs. Samuel. I am not sure if you have had the privilege of practicing across different schools. You mentioned primary school just now, but I'm speaking to maybe a primary school in All Saints versus going to a primary school in Liberta or maybe in John Hughes or somewhere to that effect. So have you worked in different locations?
I spent 15 years at JT Ambrose in All Saints, 5 years at T.N. Kernan, and 5 continuing at Villa Primary. So I have had the privilege of dealing with students in the country and also in the town or the urban area.
So my question is, do you find the challenges change depending on location, or are they generally the same wherever you are?
They're generally the same, because you have persons who will tell lies, those who will be in fights. But the difference would be the level of exposure in some areas than most. For example, in the urban areas, you find that the exposure is a little bit more, where you would find that students are prone. I don't want to be profiling the children, but you find that students would be more susceptible to fights, because these are what they're seeing on social media. They're in the schools in town, as opposed to in the countryside. Not saying that they're not there in the countryside, but you will see most of these fights and so on taking place in the town area. But all of the other areas that were covered before, they are seen across all schools.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, when I combine what you both have shared in terms of the kinds of issues, there are some very interesting issues that you mentioned. Now, Miss Joseph, you work at a private institution, and may I say a private Christian institution. But I suppose I'm assuming here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that there is some kind of association, organization for counselors, school counselors, when you come together and you meet and discuss. I don't know if that is so. That's just my assumption. Am I wrong?
No, you're not incorrect. The guidance counselors do have general meetings from time to time. I'm in contact with a few of them that work in the various schools as well too. Plus, in my experience, because I'm at a private school, we have students from all over the country as well. So you get to interact with students not only from the town areas where we're located, but also the country areas as well too. Sorry about that. We also have a school in Liberta, the New Bethel SDA Primary School, and I interact with students from that school as well too. So I get to interact with students from a wide variety of backgrounds, and also with counselors who work at different schools.
I was curious to know whether there was any appreciable difference between, let's say, fighting, stealing, drug addiction on a campus where there is, let's say, that's supposed to be quote unquote a Christian school versus a public school. You mentioned several things. You mentioned drug addiction, you mentioned sexual
Misconduct,
pornography,
yeah.
those kinds of things. It's interesting that these are issues that impact students, whether they are in a Christian institution or whether they're in a public institution. And that is one of the first things I want our parents to listen up to, that children are children wherever they go, and they must not assume that, oh, because I send my child to the Seventh Adventist school or to whichever school, then I don't have to worry. Am I correct in sharing that?
We are human beings living in a sinful world, and until Jesus comes, we're going to be wrestling with all these human failings. Whether you, well, we're a part of a church, and we know that within the church, you find all the vices, you find all the human struggles, but we believe in the power of God to help us deal with these vices rather than just human knowledge and willpower.
Mrs. Samuel, I want to ask you the next question. From time to time, I discuss certain matters on the Sabbath, on this Let's Talk program, and a few persons get uncomfortable. Some even send messages and say, oh, you're breaking the Sabbath by talking about such and such a thing. I remember one incident where a student was on the, so before I get to that, you know, some people may get uncomfortable and they may say, this is school, why are you all discussing this on Sabbath? So if somebody were to say, you have two guidance counselors on the program on a Sabbath afternoon, you shouldn't be talking about that, you should be talking about church. How would you respond to somebody who would pose a question like that?
We have to remember, as it has been said prior, that as human beings, we have different dimensions that make us us, make you Dr. Greene, make me Mauricia. We are made up of our spiritual selves, our psychological, mental, emotional, social, and physical selves. So because of that interconnectedness, when there is we are out of instinct or in sync, or we are disjointed in any sphere, it is going to affect us across the dimensions of who we are. And so if there is an issue with us spiritually, it will flow over into all the other spheres of life. And so for me, I think that now is a beautiful time to speak to parents because they're home. Today is the Sabbath, so they should be in a space where they can listen and digest, because normally on a regular day, they are busy at work. So now more than any other time is a very good time to capture parents and anything that can lead our boys and girls to be better and to have that saving relationship with Christ is something that we should speak about, even though it's on the Sabbath. We do have Education Week. And so when we have Education Week, we do speak on educational topics. So why not today?
I remember this incident, I started saying this a little earlier, where a student was underperforming because of an issue that particular student was confronted with at church. So I do think that, as you mentioned, I'll use different words, but you know, one's emotional health will impact his or her ability to truly worship. And if there are issues in school, if there are serious issues, and as we go on, I'm sure we will discover some things that parents really do need to pay attention to. So let's get rolling. I'm watching the clock, time is going quickly, but nevertheless. So let's talk about some of these issues. One concern in highlighting these is not just for the sake of discussion. I think we have talked long enough, but what we want to be able to do is to bring awareness and hope that parents, as they listen, can become sensitized to the point where they realize that they must take an interest in their children. I suspect that there are parents who send their children to school and think that the school has the responsibility of parenting those children. And so I really do want our parents to understand and appreciate why it's important for them to take an important role in what takes place at school. So let's look at, I'm going to, I didn't hear any of you mention, at least I can't remember any of you mention this particular one when I spoke, but I'm going to raise this. Let's look at a simple issue. Lack of proper nutrition. I understand that some students come to school without food and others have food but lack the proper nutritional balance. How might hunger or malnutrition impact students' performance? Who wants to take a go at this one? Go ahead, Ms.
Have you ever been in a meeting, Dr. Greene, and you're really hungry and the presenter seems as though they're not coming to an end? How does that affect your ability to listen? I want to hear what you have to say.
I could tell you, I remember, I remember as a young church member, you know, you're hungry and the preacher is going on. And in those days, they had papers, you know, and you're trying to count how much more papers he has to turn. So you're not really giving attention to what he's saying. You're trying to get how close is he to the end so that we could get a break so you could satisfy your hunger.
Correct. So can you imagine as a child, when you're hungry, Maslow says that for the hierarchy of needs, for one to reach their level of self-actualization in terms of a child wanting to, for example, here, learn as best as they can. In order for he or she to do so, that basic need of food, clothing, shelter, all those things have to be satisfied before he can move on. And so research has shown that children who are without consistent nutritious meals have a future filled with uncertainty and dietary diseases and personal changes. So what happens when a child is hungry? When he's hungry, he's unable to concentrate. He is unable to listen. He hears, but he's unable to listen, to concentrate, to assimilate the information. And then it makes it difficult for him to perform tasks. And so this now has a domino effect in that he or she would not be able to perform their duties or to perform academically. So we see a decrease in that. And then also we find that sometimes when children don't get nutritious meals, they become sick. And that leads to absenteeism that further affects the students' ability to do well academically. Fortunately, in Antigua and Barbuda, we do have a school meals program. And in the public schools, I know we have school meals provides nutritious meals at least once per day. And that was earlier where we had lunch, and it's a lovely meal of, you have your starch, protein, and vegetables. In recent times, School Meals has further expanded its program to include breakfast. So there's no reason why students should be coming to school, especially in the public primary schools, why students should not be coming to school because they don't have breakfast. In some schools where there's no school meals program, I know definitely that there are some teachers who have come together and have recognized that when children are hungry, they're unable to learn and learn well. And so they have decided to come together and provide breakfast for students at our schools, and also church members as different groups. I know women's ministries groups have come together to provide at least one nutritious meal, and that would be breakfast. I must also add, for school meals, they are given sometimes eggs and waffles. They're given, and sometimes they get sausage. Well, I don't know. Well, I'm talking about what they have. I'm not necessarily talking about Adventism, but they do get that protein there along with fruit. So because of studies showing the correlation between hunger, nutritious meals, and learning, the government of Antigua and Barbuda, along with members of society, have collaborated with schools in order to provide meals for students to support the teaching and learning environment.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Joseph, sorry. Ms. Joseph, now, again, you're in a public institution. Do you find, or have you been exposed to issues where children may be coming to school with food, but perhaps the nutritional balance is creating a challenge?
Yeah, this is definitely one of the areas that we talk to our parents a lot about. Mrs. Samuel would have outlined some of the effects that happens when a child is hungry. Not being able to concentrate, being anxious, irritable, ability to memorize and so forth, being poor. What parents feed children is also critical to their brain development. And so this is one of the areas that we tend to talk with parents a lot, because as you get into the secondary school, Ms. Summer would have talked a lot about what the government does to assist with making sure that primary school students are fed nutritiously. But sometimes with secondary school students, for various reasons, sometimes they're afraid to walk with a lunch bag because they think that it's not a cool thing to walk with a lunch bag anymore. Sometimes because parents are not supporting as much in the morning, so they get up late, and so nobody really makes them breakfast, so they run out of the house, and as they come along, whatever it is on the street, they buy. So if the vendors are selling sodas and a bag of chips, they buy that, and you see them walking into school, and that's what they're eating in the morning. Okay, so assisting parents with what is nutritious, what it actually means to provide nutritious meals, teaching the students a lot about how to feed themselves is so important and critical. Is one of the things that we focus on in the secondary school as well. I remember one time I was sitting with a young mom at a crusade, and she had a little toddler on her lap, and it was near to the end, and she had, I think she was a new convert. She had a piece of chocolate, and she was breaking off a piece of the chocolate and feeding the child. So I was saying, the child might be a little hungry, but chocolate mightn't be the best thing for the baby. And she was telling me she didn't even realize that, because she fed the child whatever she ate. And so we were just having a conversation about the impact of a lot of sugar and how it causes children to become a hyper, not able to focus, and then crash and be sleepy and lethargic. So parents need a lot of education, and sometimes we assume that people know what is a nutritious meal. And so part of our role is to help parents to know what is a nutritious meal. What do we mean by providing protein? What do we mean by providing a starch? What do we mean by providing the vitamins and nutrients? And what are the foods that provide these? And what are some of the options? And what are some of the options economically and easily, that we live in a busy world, that you can do easily and economically? Things are very expensive in Antigua. And people sometimes say, they can't afford to buy fruits and so forth. And I would always say, there are fruits all around us. If your neighbor has plums, pick some plums. If your neighbor have some sugar apples, some DOMs, all of these are foods that you can add to your child's
Lunch bag.
lunch. Yes. Okay. So I try to help them figure out what is a nutritious meal, what is economical, and what is easy to access.
I'm aware that I'm speaking to school counselors, and I'm aware that you have an obligation to be discreet with your information. But as we speak about hunger and economic challenges, one of the concerns that I have personally is something that I think is very disturbing, where you have unmarried people getting children and individuals who are not able to take care of the children getting children. I encountered a young girl once. In fact, I was in a public place, and there was an older lady talking to another woman, and she said, "Wait there, is your child I saw the other day in someplace?" And the lady said, "Yes, that was my child. No, that was my grandchild." And she said, "Your grandchild? Wait, is another one she gets?" And the mother said, "Yes." And she asked her, "How many she has now?" And she said, "6. And the lady said, "And how old is she?" And she said, 21. Now, can you imagine somebody 21 years of age with 6 children? Now it's difficult. So my assumption was maybe she had triplets twice, but the lady asked, "Any of them twins?" And she said, "No." That's kind of crazy.
Those are the realities. Those are the realities that we are faced with on a day-to-day basis. You try to encourage, especially if you forge relationships with parents, you try to encourage them, as diplomatically as possible. But once you have good relationship with those parents, you can speak candidly with them and offer. I know in our case, we have offered to give suggestions, but I mean, it's a suggestion, but that is because you have forged a relationship. We tend to, in schools, tend to help parents of that nature because we work along with the alumnus of the school. They will come together and we would provide packages for these persons. As Ms. Joseph said, the role of the counselor is to make certain that we work along with stakeholders in order to help the child. And if it comes to the point where we have to help the parent as well, we would have to do that and put them on to agencies in welfare that can give them some assistance so that they can provide these meals for these children.
Okay, very well. Now, I want to go back a little bit to when I asked the question about the role of the school counselor. And because I'm conscious of my time, I do want to speak to this one. I saw a video circulating. It's interesting where I got this video from. School has recently reopened. I'm not sure if it's 2 weeks now, I think. And there's already a video circulating of a school brawl, where there's a fight between some students. And what's amazing, the individual that sent this to me, the intent was not just to circulate something on social media. I got this from a government minister because we were dealing with an issue of intervention. But as I looked at the video, I noticed that there were lots of children who were looking on and were not intervening to stop the fight, as though they had cheerleaders on the side. And I'm amazed that 2 children can be involved in a contention with so many other students around. And rather than them holding the students and saying, "No, quiet down, don't do this," that the crowd gets bigger and nobody is stepping in to say, relax yourself, cool down, that's not good enough. School fights. So I want to throw this in. I didn't plan to ask this question, but in light of, you know, current events, what are some of the reasons? Why would you have children becoming violent and then others are willing to video this and send it on social media?
Well, quite frankly, sad to say, human nature without God does tend to watch on for violence. And in fact, you have to teach persons to intervene. Very often, if there's a large crowd, people are less likely to intervene to help. If it's one-on-one and they're the only person around, they are more likely to help. So it's something that you have to sensitize and make children aware of and role play and practice and get them comfortable with. Even adults, when we see something bad happening, sometimes a lot of persons will stand at the side and just watch. And sometimes only after one courageous person will come forward and do something do you see more persons trying to intervene. So it is something that we have to be conscious about and intentional about intervening in situations. It's also the norm now to video everything as a means of discussion for later on, laughing at for later on. So it has become a sort of societal norm. So it's not just amongst children as well too. I'm sure you've seen videos of accidents that have happened on the road, and adults as well will stand aside and just video rather than intervene to help. And you just hear everybody commenting around, but nobody really coming forward. Very few persons coming forward to help. So it's a societal thing, and children act up on what they see. So they will see videos going around and this is what is happening. They will see videos on social media and this is what is happening. And so it's become the norm. It sets the norm for their behavior as well. As for aggression, why people are so aggressive, there's so many reasons why people are so aggressive today. We've learned it. If we ever get around to talking about the effect of electronic devices, sorry, that also has eroded our ability to manage our emotions. Social factors, because it's become so prevalent, it's what we act upon. So there's so many reasons why we are aggressive as well too. And what we're eating also contributes to aggression. A lot of the sugary foods, a lot of the processed foods provide no nutrition for the brain, create aggression in children, and it create aggression in people. So all of these things are combining to create the aggressive nature that we're seeing in society, and the fact that very few persons intervene or have the courage to intervene. So we have to start at this, addressing these things at the source: what we eat, how we teach our children, how we as adults model behavior. When we get a video of something violent happening, do we sit down with them and laugh or say, look what happened now, look at this, and that kind of things? When we see problems, do we have the courage as adults to step forward and say, no, this is not right? Do we talk to them about the situations they see, and then what will they do in that particular situation, and what is a safe way to intervene? What is a safe way to help? So these are some of the ways that we can try to help with those situations, and also some of the reasons why it's happening.
Mrs. I know you want to comment, so go right ahead.
Yes, I wanted to add also, have you listened to the music that our children are listening to?
Yes.
The music that they're listening to, they're highly violent. They
Yes.
teach and support aggression. Watch the video games that they play. I mean, these games, they put it within their minds. Actually, they condition children to think that aggression is the best way to go. And sometimes it dulls the senses, where it desensitizes you to the real nature of life, that when I kill you, that is it's sometimes you get lives. And so I don't think sometimes these children understand that these means of these media are used by the devil to create these pathways for our children to be aggressive towards each other, to hurt each other. And it speaks to the fact that parents need to step in and to be conscious of the things that their children are watching, what they're listening to, what they're playing and reading, because they're feeding the senses and they're being conditioned, along with the fact that they are associating with persons who have deviant types of behaviors. And sometimes we're afraid to stand out. So we try to fit in. And here's where we have to teach our children that we need to stand up. If your friend, do not encourage your friend in deviant behaviors. Encourage them to listen. And that's why as counselors, we encourage children to have peer counseling, where we have persons within the school system where they can speak to the other peers and tell them, listen, this does not require a fight. Sometimes you have to learn to walk away. Be like a Joseph, run to fight another day. And so whereas we are speaking about it, parents should model these types of behaviors too, and people in society, because children are just little miniature, I believe, miniature adults that mimic what the adults in their lives do. Because as Ms. Joseph said, I mean, watch the adults when something happens and the expletives and the laughter and the jeering, and nobody stops until, and not even to stop if somebody dies. Because I remember a situation just recently, and it touched me because of association, that an uncle and a son had a fight down at the West Bus Station, to the point where the nephew had killed the uncle, and all the people were there, and nobody said stop, come, cool out. And so we need people in society who would not encourage these bad behaviors, but to be willing to say, you know what, calm yourself down and see how well we can do some conflict resolutions. Children learn from what they see.
Yeah. So parents do have to be active and intentional about teaching these skills.
So while we're on it, we might as well just continue on the line of the exposure, because we won't get time to go into things like the physical and sexual abuse and so on. Perhaps we can plan to discuss that next week, some very important elements there. But I am challenged by a parent buying, and maybe these days the children are buying them themselves. That's another story. But, you know, when you give your children a particular video game where they are shooting and killing people and finding glory in how many persons you can kill. Some of these games, the very look at it, and maybe I'm old-timeish, but the very look of the thing seems evil to me. And how do you get satisfaction from allowing your toddler to sit down there and be shooting and killing somebody else and rejoicing and getting positive scores for doing that? That seems to me as though it has some kind of effect on the mind of that individual, where we are degrading the value of life. Am I correct?
You are correct.
You are correct. And one of the things that is a constant battle in school and in society is the impact of video games, social media on our children. One of the things I tell my parents is that technology is often ahead of the science that looks at the impact of these things. Right now, we're very into AI, and we are fully embracing the use of AI without looking at the impact of AI that is going to have on people. The same thing happened with social media, same thing happened with video games. Now the science is beginning to catch up with the use of these technologies. And so psychologists, medical scientists are finding that video games, social media are linked to poor focus and attention. They're linked to depression. They're linked to the inability to to memorize. They're linked to what I want to say, increased gullibility then, because we are taking in so much information without being able to process it, as would happen if you are reading or discussing something. When you're watching a video game, quite a lot of information is coming at you at a very fast rate, much faster than your brain is able to process. And so whereas in the past, we used to have to sit down and read and study on the facts and so forth, and your frontal lobe had the ability to process this information, be able to distinguish fact from fiction, people are becoming even more gullible. And so we have the rise of fake news and belief in all of those things. Children are unable to focus and pay attention in school because you will notice with YouTube, TikTok, all of these things are very, very short videos. And so your attention span is being shortened. And the very area of your brain that's used to pay attention and focus is also used to help to manage your emotions. And so when that area of the brain is shrinking, then you're getting the aggressiveness coming out, people not able to manage their emotions, not able to process information as well. So the impact of of these things are now being realized. And so now psychologists and scientists are beginning to trying to put the brakes on the use of these things. And I think many people are not hearing the message because of the addictive nature. That's another discussion, the addictive nature of these things. And so the recommendation is for babies up to 18 months not to use electronic devices at all unless they're having a FaceTime chat with a parent. For 2 to 5, no more, 2 to 6, no more than an hour. And for teenagers going up, no more than 2 hours each day on electronic devices. And how to use these electronic devices as well too. Not a lot of time on TikTok and Instagram and what's the other one they like? Slipping me right now. Okay, not a lot of time on these things because they are bad for your brain development, educational programs, if you have to, and parents have to model this as well. I remember one student, just when we had orientation for our new students and I was talking with the parents, one new student put up their hand and said, and ma'am, parents must also not just tell us, but put down their phones too. So model the use of these. We don't have time for me to get in. This is one of my favorite topics to talk on, Pastor Greene. So we don't have time to get into all of it, but these things are having a major impact on our society.
Indeed, indeed. Mrs. Samuel, you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to add the fact that it's going back to emphasizing what Ms. Joseph said in terms of the modeling of behaviors. Do as I say and not as I do. How many times our children come to us and we're on our phones? Sometimes I am guilty, but I have to be aware of the fact that my children want my attention. These video games that and I can't believe in this day and age, our parents are buying guns and buying these things that would encourage students to be aggressive. When you watch these video games, they dull the senses. And so children become more aggressive. So whenever they feel threatened or they feel as though the person wants to show me up, I react with aggression. And so the impulsivity comes out. And then only after, because they don't stop and think now, because it has become a natural aspect of their behavior and attitudes and character somewhat, you find that they would tend to react and think later. So I encourage parents to have conversations about these things and really look at, because sometimes we allow the children to dictate what they want to buy and forget that we are the parents. We should be protecting our children at all costs.
Yeah, I know it can be a difficult thing sometimes, Dr. Greene. I'll just give you an example. I know we're coming to the end. Because of the addictive nature of games and videos, etc. Sometimes we have to be very firm in monitoring our children. Just on Monday, I had my niece with me, and it was about 5 something in the afternoon, and I was a little tired, and she had finished her homework, and so she wanted to sit down and do her puzzle. So I told her I'd help her. It's a 1,000-piece puzzle, and we sat together, and I started to sort her pieces with her, and then I got tired and I fell asleep. And then the next thing I knew, it was after 6, and her dad had come to pick her up, and he was saying to me, "Where is she?" And when I looked around, she was not in the room anymore. And when we found her, she in the bedroom with her grandmother's tablet, sneaking a video when she knows she's not supposed to watch tablet. So I know it's not an easy thing, but parents have to be vigilant and intentional about monitoring the use of these things, because the impact can be very detrimental to their children.
Well, it's interesting because you gave some guidelines, 0 to
18 months.
18 months.
No use of electronic devices.
I watch. One of the things I do when I go to church is that I observe. I know we're talking about things in school, but the school is an extension. We can't get away from the home influence, eh? And I observe when I go to church how parents relate to their children. And the child is talking or something, and they pick up their cell phone, they put on a video, and they give it to the child. And I have seen children playing all sorts of games in church. And I'm not talking about spiritual games either. They're just occupying themselves. And I think that is a travesty, that parents are too busy, too consumed with their own interests to recognize that they are setting up their children for failure by just giving them a screen to look at. Yes. And I think that is something that really, really needs to be emphasized. Well, unfortunately, our time is up. Our time has expired. But so I want to thank you both for sharing. You have raised some very serious issues. We are going to continue the discussion next week. Next week, we're going to look into the whole matter of abuse. We're going to try to sneak in bullying, and that's a big one, whether it be physical bullying or cyberbullying and the impact of those things, and even sexual abuse and the whole concept of something maybe happening in the home. And as a counselor, you may discover things at school, and how do we relate to those things? So next week is a very interesting discussion. There's a bit of chatter on the YouTube channel, but we don't have time to respond to those things. But we will bring all those into the discussion next week. Thank you so much for sharing with us. That's all the time we have for today. So next week, we look forward to seeing you both. We want to wish all of our viewers a pleasant afternoon. For those of you who are listening in Antigua, remember that we continue our week. In fact, we culminate the week of emotional wellness this afternoon. The Bible Speaks in a half an hour's time. May God bless you.